You're listening to the Final Say Radio Show, a Rappaport Media production, with your host Brett Rappaport and co-host John Rappaport.
Without further ado, let me bring J.D. Gordon, who is the Executive Director of Protect America Today, and he's with us, and he's got another significant issue to discuss, and that is Russia, Vladimir Putin, and potential geopolitical and military threats that this nation faces. And while the president ignores the one on the southern border, he's evidently ignoring the one coming from Eastern Europe. JD, welcome.
Hi, John. Hi, Brett. How you guys doing today?
We're doing great. And while I know that you took an extensive trip overseas, and I'm sure you have plenty to share with us and some firsthand knowledge, but JD, if you can, please give us a sense of what your understanding is as far as what Vladimir Putin and what the Russians are up to right now.
Well, thanks for having me on the show to discuss it. I do appreciate it. I just spent 2 weeks in the South Caucasus visiting all three countries there, Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. I also went to Turkey, and I spoke at the Georgia Defense and Security Conference in Batumi on the Black Sea. I talked about European security, and on the panel with me was Latvia's defense minister and the NATO ambassador from Estonia, and also a fellow from Chatham House who's a lecturer at Oxford University. And so basically I came away with the impression that Russia is really playing a World Cup of sorts against the international community, even though their soccer team's been eliminated. And it occurred to me that they're doing so because they have an elaborate strategy. So I have a column I have today in the Washington Times. It's called Russia Plays Its Own Game Away from the World Cup. And that is, the subhead, Putin's game is to rebuild the lost Soviet empire. And it's in the Washington Times today. And my main point is that what looks like a simple form of aggression that Vladimir Putin's trying to reconstitute the empire just at random is not really the case. He's trying to reconstitute the empire, but he's actually doing so according to law and national policy in Russia. And that's the part where I'm comparing it to the World Cup, because to the average guy that doesn't know anything about soccer, right, they just see people running down the field kicking a ball, trying to kick it into the net. But it's actually very complicated. They've got these diamond wedges. They've got complex set pieces, these headers, bicycle kicks, feigned injuries, you name it. It's actually quite complicated. So it's the same with Russia trying to annex areas of their neighbors. It's complicated and is codified into national law. It's not a state secret, but people don't know about it here. And let me tell you how they did it. When Putin came into power in the end of 1999, he set about mechanisms to make sure that law and national policy, national security policy in Russia allowed them to annex their neighbors. How did they do it? Well, first, in 2001, the Russian Duma, which is like their parliament, they passed a law that would allow states or parts of other states to apply for membership in the Russian Federation. So that was in 2001. It would be like if the U.S. passed a law saying that if parts of Canada or parts of Mexico or parts of the Caribbean wanted to join the U.S., they could petition and be accepted. So that's number one. So then number two, in 2003, what happened is Russia passed a policy that essentially codified that they have the use of military force to protect Russian speakers. So that would be like if we passed a law here saying in 2003 that we could use military force to protect Americans wherever they are. And we could just use it as a pretext to send troops wherever they are. And so number three, Russia did in 2004, they codified in their national security strategy that they would expedite Russian passports to anybody who spoke Russian. So that would be like if the U.S. basically passed a law saying that, okay, for Mexico and Canada, our direct neighbors, or even Central America if you want to go down that far, saying anybody that speaks English could get a U.S. passport. And then we have the right to go send military forces in there to protect them. That's basically what Vladimir Putin is trying to do. Georgia was the first test case in 2008. He took over 20% of Georgia. He still occupies Abkhazia and Ossetia, two provinces in Georgia that I just visited. I was just there a week ago, and I saw the Russian occupation border zones. And let me tell you, they're very arbitrary. They cut through people's property. They separate families. Literally. I saw a farmer on the other side of the fence that couldn't get to his daughter. He'd have to go all the way to Russia and then back around through another part of Georgia. He'd have to go to Moscow and fly to Tbilisi to see his daughter across the fence. It's that arbitrary and that cruel what the Russians are doing over there. I saw it with my own eyes. And so basically Vladimir Putin's trying to reconstitute Russia based on Russian law and Russian policy. And by the way, most Russians agree with him. About 60% of Russians also agree that the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century was the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Vladimir Putin said it in 2005, and according to the most recent Pew polls in Russia, 60% of the people agree with him.
Well, Gordon, if we can tie into your soccer analogy, I would say never underestimate the power of pride in a geopolitical sense. You know, on the final say, we spent an awful lot of time bemoaning and taking issue with Obama's lack of a cohesive strategy, but also about his conviction to implement same. JD, one of the things that I wanted to get your opinion on, I know we're on a relatively short time leash today, but I wanted to get your opinion on two fronts. One, what impression were you left with from the allies and other countries that you visited with, in other words, their impression of Obama's America? And secondarily, what was your takeaway? Did they perceive this as America's problem, as EU's problem? Speaking, of course, of the reconstitution of a Russian empire or of a Soviet empire.
Well, number one, I think that Europeans are disillusioned with President Obama. They were very enthused when he was elected because they really didn't like President Bush over there. They didn't like the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. So they liked his message for peace, and they even gave him a Nobel Prize in Norway for it. But then they realized that when the U.S. abandons the leadership role, and the U.S. has been a force for good around the world, it has been a force for freedom and democracy, when the U.S. takes a backseat, you get bad guys like Vladimir Putin stepping up and filling the vacuum. So Europeans are painfully aware of that, so they're disappointed, number one. And number two, they do fear Russia because Russia's the toughest group in the bunch right now. I mean, militarily, the European Union is stronger than Russia. There are 28 member states. They spend about $220 billion a year on defense. Russia spends $80 billion. The U.S. spends $495 billion a year on defense right now, and that's down from about $700 billion. So if it came down to a conventional war right now, the U.S. and the EU would crush Russia. They'd crush Russia. But that's not saying that we have the will to do it, and Putin knows it. So Putin's willing to actually take the tough risk because he's a much tougher president than Obama. Obama's very tough on Americans. He's tough when it comes to dealing with Republicans. He rules with an iron fist at home. But when it comes to dealing with foreign powers, he's like a Neville Chamberlain. So there's a lot of irony in that. But the Europeans are very disappointed in President Obama. They think they got a bad bill of goods. They wanted something that they didn't get. They sort of helped buy into this fantasy land to make him popular. So it's partially Europeans' fault for all the hype that they gave him during the 2008 campaign.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I would argue while Barack Obama may be like Neville Chamberlain, he's actually much worse because I think he actually assists the enemy as well, not just making it easy for them. But anyway, JD, I know you're very short on time, so we want to thank you for joining us today. And we've posted on our social media your article today. Gordon, Russia plays its own game away from the World Cup, and you can find that at thewashingtontimes.com. But again, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Brett. Thanks, John. Always a pleasure.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye.